So far, I haven't covered many nightmarish creatures on this channel yet, with the exception of course of the saber-tooths. Yes, Arthropleura, the gargantuan swamp-dwelling millipede, is nightmarish in its own bizarre way, but it's not a creature that would be particularly intimidating once you warmed up to it. Neither would it really have posed much of a threat to human life. And whilst gorillas can most certainly be intimidating, some of their ominous charm is alleviated when you realize they're bulked up hominoids who value above all a good peach and time with their kids. The subject of this video does not fall into that category. In fact, its fossil alone suggests the opposite. Scutosaurus likely lived between 260 and 250 million years ago, which is not too long of a reign as compared to many other genuses, but also much longer than the amount of time modern humans have been around. So I'm not really one to talk. It was certainly long enough to have left its mark on paleontology, and long enough to also have scared the proverbial pants off of many an unsuspecting prehistoric passerby. As far as researchers are aware, its zone of inhabitation eclipsed most of modern European Russia, which admittedly makes for a somewhat restricted range, possibly hinting at high amounts of specialization, although the fragmented and incomplete nature of the fossil record must not be forgotten. It could certainly be the case that modern paleontology is simply not in possession of the other fossil evidences which would prove its range extended far beyond the area we associate with it today. Certainly other parasaurs similar to Scutosaurus did inhabit more varied environments. It is currently designated as a parareptile, which means it was an organism which counted itself among the more basal ranks of the reptilian sauropsids, a term literally meaning near reptile. It should also be noted that even this classification is contended, as it is the purview of a growing number of researchers that the subclassification parareptile is an invalid clade. Suffice it to say that many aspects of Scutosaurus's existence are subject to speculation and re-examination. The initial discoveries of this creature at the tail end of the 19th century were quite remarkable, due to the fact that Scutosaurus's discoverers managed to excavate entire fossil representations of multiple specimens. These specimens had been fossilized completely in situ and retained their natural lifelike positions. Dedicated, thorough studies of the fossils were unfortunately delayed due to the minor inconvenience of World War I. But researchers were eventually able to finally get their hands on the specimens, and through a long, convoluted, years-long process that I won't burden you with, arrived at the name Scutosaurus. What makes the creature so notable is not merely its enormous size, which of course is notable. It is the peculiar arrangement of its skeleton and the push-up-like stance it probably adopted. Scutosaurus's wide base and splaying of its arms is so considerable that a part of me first mistook it to be some sort of robust prehistoric turtle which was simply missing its shell. This, coupled with its thick-limbed and muscle-bound post-cranium, would have certainly made it quite the unique creature indeed. Another one of its peculiarities is something which sets it apart from the majority of its reptilian contemporaries. Typically, reptiles of this period would have had their legs positioned largely peripherally. Think of the way a crocodile's morphology is arranged. The legs jut out of the trunk from its flanks, allowing for a crouched, low-to-the-ground posture. Scutosaurus represented quite a marked deviation from this earlier trend, with its legs positioned much more anteriorly, allowing it to prop itself up higher off of the ground, granting it a better view of its environment. Its diligence wasn't the only thing deterring predators from pursuing it, though. Scutosaurus was absolutely covered in thick bony plates called osteoderms which decorated most of its hulking gargantuan anatomy. In fact, the very name Scutosaurus translates to shield lizard. This, of course, would have made taking down an adult Scutosaurus quite a task indeed. When you also factor into the equation the reality that it was likely one of the largest reptiles on the face of the earth at the time, then you really start to have a formidable prey item. Scutosaurus specimens have been found to grow to between 2.5 to 3 meters in length and weigh up to 1,160 kilograms. As if its titanium exterior and bulldog gait weren't enough, you also had to deal with over a ton of pure reptilian beef charging at you. Although, to be honest, they likely couldn't charge at you very quickly. Given its large size and short, stout, rather awkwardly positioned legs, Scutosaurus was unlikely to have been a very fast runner. The sheer weight of the creature, combined with the fact that it occupied largely dry, arid environments, meant that it also may not have had the energy to expend running around everywhere. If it was forced to run, it more than likely only did so in occasional short bursts. In addition to granting it the ability to bulldoze through predators and competitors alike, Scutosaurus's large size likely also granted it a potent digestive system. Discovered specimens usually have broad, barrel-shaped rib cages and probably sported quite large midsections during their lives. These roomy interiors would have been able to accommodate a complex and substantial digestive system, which would have aided the creature in processing the vast amounts of vegetation it no doubt had to consume in order to maintain its enormity. When it comes to unpacking its evolutionary history, you could argue Scutosaurus was essentially a scaled-up version of its smaller parareptilian ancestors. Although this would be somewhat of an oversimplification, Scutosaurus possesses numerous traits which do set it apart quite substantially from its predecessors. It likely faced harsher burdens than its ancestors in the form of large, newly evolved, specialized predators which began to populate its environment. As a result, the earlier Proto-Scutosaurus would have faced mounting pressures to grow in size as a means of combating this increased likelihood of predation. Accompanying this newly acquired mass, Scutosaurus also evolved a more anteriorly positioned limb placement in order to more easily support its mass. Crocodilians at least have the support of aquatic buoyancy to help support their large size, so they need not evolve a vertical gait. Scutosaurus, however, did not have this luxury and was forced to endure the crushing realities of life on land. Had it retained its ancestral anatomy and sported a largely horizontal limb placement, it certainly would have sacrificed some of its later mobility and perhaps may not have been able to support its massive size as a land dweller at all. Its dense osteodermic coat also evolved in response to the sudden increase in predation, a means of defense its smaller ancestors are likely to have lacked. There is also some evidence to suggest that Scutosaurus exhibited a staggered growth pattern, meaning it would have initially grown at a very fast pace, enabling it to escape the vulnerability associated with being a small, helpless juvenile earlier on. Then later in adolescence, a more gradual growth rate could be adopted. This may have increased the survival rate of young Scutosauruses by allowing them to access a crucial survival adaptation at a young age. By quickly swelling in size, even juvenile Scutosaurus could pose a threat to any would-be attackers. Almost all of the characteristics of Scutosaurus seem to suggest it had a quite hard-scrabble life and occupied an environment filled with dangers, perhaps helping to explain its somewhat brief tenure on this planet. Regardless, Scutosaurus demonstrates the ability of an organism to adapt to harsh conditions and persist despite the many challenges it may face. Indeed, the reptile that grows twice as large lives half as long.